Imagine a single military order that instantly rewrites the global balance of power. Today, in this explainer, we're skipping the usual pleasantries and dropping right into a massive, high-stakes hypothetical. We're looking at what happens when France deploys the Foreign Legion. Not just moving troops, but wielding a massive historical legacy to project sheer, undeniable strength. Picture this exact moment. The Mediterranean is calm, the headlines are, well, totally ordinary, and we're all just going about our daily grind. And then, suddenly, boom. Breaking news absolutely shatters the noise. A single alert flashes across our screens, and it completely hijacks the international agenda. Every newsroom, every diplomatic channel, literally every military command center on Earth just freezes to process this one massive development. What if France deploys the Foreign Legion? This one hypothetical question hits like a thunderclap. It turns a standard military movement into an instant global geopolitical storm. It sounds almost cinematic, right? Like something straight out of a political thriller. But honestly, that's exactly why we're digging into this source material today. The second this almost mythical unit steps into a modern crisis, the story becomes so much bigger than just France. It instantly shifts from a local dispute to a major global event. To really grasp the weight of this scenario, we have to look at what the Legion actually represents. Built on over a century of incredibly brutal operational standards, this is a highly disciplined formation that symbolizes endurance and elite readiness. So sending them in, that is a deliberate geopolitical statement. It's a profound declaration of intent and hard power. When the Legion arrives, it signals an unyielding commitment. The host nation, the adversaries, the whole observing world, they all instantly realize that Paris is done issuing warnings and is fundamentally prepared for sustained, high-intensity conflict. Section 1. More than just soldiers. Let's dive right into this and look at the severe circumstances that would actually force France to make such a dramatic move. Because look, France does not use the Legion lightly. Any of the triggers you see here would instantly signal to the world that things have gotten incredibly serious. We're talking about collapsing security in overseas territories where local forces are completely overwhelmed, or maybe sudden counter-terror operations in the Sahel, high-stakes evacuations of trapped citizens, or intense deterrence missions nearer tense borders. Even severe domestic emergencies protecting critical infrastructure. The exact trigger obviously matters, but the global reaction would be totally unified. France isn't playing games anymore. They are gearing up for something standard forces just can't handle. The crucial takeaway here is that putting these specific soldiers on the ground speaks way louder than any diplomatic warning ever could. Think of it like dropping a massive, heavy anchor into a volatile harbor. It immediately changes the currents around it. The real power of the Foreign Legion is that it symbolizes a level of readiness and commitment that ordinary political rhetoric simply can't match. It tells enemies to back off, reassures allies, and buys crucial time for diplomats. But, this credibility cuts both ways. The moment France sends them in, every other actor on the global stage assumes France expects heavy resistance, prolonged danger, and is absolutely willing to accept the worst-case scenario. Section 2, Flashpoints in Africa and Europe. Now, what's really fascinating is how the exact geographical location of this deployment completely changes how the world interprets the message. It's literally like night and day. Look at Africa versus Europe. A deployment in Africa instantly triggers intense debates over post-colonial influence, sovereignty, and counterterrorism. It creates this deeply divided narrative. Is it necessary stabilization to stop a state from collapsing, or just controversial foreign power projection? But contrast that with Europe. Deploying this specific unit in Europe is highly, highly unusual. If these elite troops are suddenly placed near a tense European border, it implies immediate deterrence or rapid, desperate defense. It sparks emergency NATO assessments and genuine fears of a massive regional war brewing. It's the exact same elite force, but it triggers entirely different historical anxieties depending on where they step off the plane. Meanwhile, back home in France, the domestic reaction would be split right down the middle. You've got this balancing act between deep pride in their legendary military tradition and the sharp anxiety of a prolonged conflict. The public might feel somewhat comforted knowing elite, professional troops are handling the crisis, rather than standard conscripts. But, let's be real, public opinion matters deeply. Every major security move inevitably turns into a fierce political battle. Fears of the government opening up a brand new, decades-long foreign entanglement, plus all the anxiety over rising financial costs, escalation, and, of course, casualties. Section 3, Global Markets and Diplomacy. The shockwaves of this deployment wouldn't just stay confined to the battlefield. They would immediately slam into the global economy and completely upend international diplomacy. I love how this breaks down the geopolitical chain reaction, because a single elite deployment causes an immediate domino effect across the board. Local militias on the ground, they don't just magically surrender. They harden their operational positions and dig in for a brutal fight. Rival governments immediately issue stern warnings or mobilize their own forces in response. International organizations start demanding restraint and setting up watchdogs to monitor human rights. And financial markets, they completely panic, spiking insurance rates and questioning regional stability. In geopolitics, the perception of a deployment is often the first battlefield, and everyone is reacting to the sheer symbol of the Legion long before a single shot is fired. Looking closer at the economic shockwaves, it becomes crystal clear why everyday people thousands of miles away would suddenly care. When investors panic, military action instantly threatens supply chains. If the Legion moves near critical maritime choke points or resource hubs, investors immediately question trade route safety. Insurance rates for commercial shipping spike literally overnight. You get massive energy company instability, which directly leads to higher prices at the pump for consumers worldwide. Our modern world is so deeply interconnected that hard military action hits the global balance sheets just as hard as it hits the actual battlefield. And we can't ignore the media cycle. The narrative spreads so much faster than the facts. The news would absolutely explode with digital maps, expert panels, and, let's face it, wild speculation. Social media platforms would be flooded with both intense glorification and fierce condemnation of the move. By the time the actual nuanced details of the mission are declassified or even remotely understood by the public, emotions are already running incredibly hot. This makes the volatile public perception of the deployment just as dangerous and unpredictable for policymakers as the military reality on the ground. Which brings us to Section 4, the exit plan problem. Let's move to the absolute heaviest burden of projecting this kind of hard power. Because while the Legion can enter a conflict quickly and decisively, maintaining that presence brings immense legal, moral, and political baggage. This is the diplomatic burden. France would have to constantly justify the deployment under international law, facing down relentless opposition. There would be intense human rights and journalistic scrutiny targeting every single patrol. If civilians are harmed, the global and domestic backlash is absolutely instantaneous. Ultimately, Paris isn't just sending soldiers on a quick mission. They are entering a heavy, years-long chain of responsibility. The terrifying reality is that an elite unit can enter a conflict quickly, but no force can stay indefinitely without consequences. Even the most successful stabilization missions can easily mutate into endless, costly entanglements. Deployments always sound incredibly decisive and organized at the very beginning, right? The elite troops arrive, the perimeter is expertly secured, the initial objective is met. But the real test of a global power is how and when those deployments actually end. Because deploying elite forces, that's actually the easy part. Leaving is the real nightmare. Does the crisis actually stabilize? Or does France get pulled into a bleeding decade-long commitment? Does projecting this power successfully deter rivals? Or does it boldly invite them to escalate things even further? So when the world's most famous military unit marches in, we are left with the ultimate provocative question. What is the exit plan?